When I walked into the office that morning, I had no idea my life was about to flip upside down. The air felt heavier than usual, like the walls already knew something I didn't. Everyone was moving fast, whispering in corners, pretending to look busy. But I could tell something was off. I had worked there for 6 years. I knew every rhythm, every habit, every silence. And that morning's silence was different. I remember sitting at my desk, organizing the files for the new project I'd been leading for months. My name was on every document, every report, every pitch deck. I had spent endless nights building that campaign from scratch, researching, creating, fixing what others broke. It wasn't just a job. It was mine. My creation. My proof that I belonged. Then, just before lunch, I got a message from HR. "Can you come to the conference room for a quick meeting?" My stomach dropped. The words "quick meeting" never meant anything good in that company. I took a deep breath, grabbed my notebook, and walked down the long glass hallway. I could see them before I even entered, the CEO, the project director, and Mark. Mark, sitting there with that smug half-smile he always wore when he knew something I didn't. The moment I stepped inside, I could tell where this was going. The CEO didn't look me in the eye. The project director shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Only Mark looked at me like he was already enjoying the show. They told me the company was restructuring and that my role was being reassigned. Reassigned. That word burned in my head. They didn't say eliminated or terminated. They said reassigned, meaning someone else was taking over. And that someone was Mark. He was getting my position, my title, my team, and as I would later learn, a $9,400 performance bonus given for a project I built. My project. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, staring at the CEO, wondering if he could even hear the sound of my heart pounding. I wanted to ask why. Why, after everything I'd done, every late night, every weekend, every problem I solved while others slept. But the look in their eyes told me I wouldn't get an answer that made sense. So I smiled, just a small, empty smile. And I said, "Thank you for letting me know." Then I walked out. As I packed up my desk, no one said a word. Not one person looked up. I realized how fragile everything really was, the loyalty, the teamwork, the friendships. All of it disappeared the moment you stopped being useful to someone else. By the time I reached the parking lot, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just numb. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my car. I sat there for a while, staring at the building that had once felt like my second home. That was when the anger started to rise, not just at them, but at myself. For believing I was safe. For trusting people who smiled in my face while plotting behind my back. But here's the thing they didn't know. I still had access to the system. For 3 more hours, before my credentials were officially disabled. 3 hours before they erased me completely. 3 hours might not sound like much, but for someone who knows the company inside out, 3 hours is an eternity. I went back home, turned on my laptop, and logged in one last time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wasn't planning revenge. At least, not at first. I just wanted to see what they were doing with my project. How they were twisting my work into something to make Mark look like a genius. But as I started going through the files, I noticed something strange. A hidden folder, one I hadn't created, buried deep in the shared drive. It was labeled Q4 Private. I clicked it open. Inside were financial records, invoices, and emails that didn't add up. Huge payments going to companies that didn't exist. Shell accounts. Fake vendors. The kind of things people get locked up for. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But the deeper I dug, the worse it got. And every single document had one name on it, Mark's. That was the moment my anger turned into focus. They hadn't just stolen my work. They'd built their entire empire on lies. And now I was holding the proof. I backed everything up. Emails, attachments, payment logs, everything. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. But I knew I wasn't going to let them bury me quietly. Not after what they'd done. By the time my access expired, I had more than enough to make the whole $48 million empire tremble. But I didn't move yet. I waited. I wanted them to feel safe. To think I was gone, defeated, forgotten. Then, exactly 3 hours after they took my role and handed Mark his shiny bonus, the first domino fell. It started with one email. Just one, sent to the wrong person. Or maybe the right one, depending on how you look at it. Within minutes, phones started ringing. Messages started flying. The calm confidence that had filled that office hours earlier was replaced by chaos. People were panicking, whispering, calling meetings. Something big was happening, and they didn't even realize it had just begun. I sat back, watching it unfold from my laptop screen, heart racing. I didn't know exactly how far it would go. I just knew one thing. Whatever was built on lies was about to come crashing down. And as I saw the first news alert pop up on my phone, I smiled for the first time that day. Not out of revenge, but out of relief. Because for once, the truth was finally louder than their power. But what happened next, even I didn't expect. Because when you pull one thread in a web that big, you never know how many lies are tangled inside it. And by the time the sun set that day, their empire wasn't just trembling, it was collapsing. 3 hours after they stripped me of everything, the company that once felt untouchable was already beginning to shake. What none of them knew was that I wasn't done yet, not even close. Watching the first signs of panic ripple through their perfectly polished walls gave me a strange sense of calm. I didn't have a plan, not a clear one, but I had something better: proof. The kind of proof that could burn down lies that had been standing for years. As the chaos unfolded, my phone buzzed nonstop. A few coworkers reached out, pretending to check in, but I could read between the lines. They wanted to know if I was behind the storm brewing inside the company. I didn't answer. Let them wonder. The silence was louder than any message I could send. Later that evening, I sat on my couch surrounded by open folders, screenshots, and USB drives. My living room had turned into an evidence room. I didn't plan this, but it was happening naturally, like it had been waiting to happen. Every email I read, every invoice I opened, painted the same picture: years of money quietly disappearing under fake projects and ghost contracts. And right in the middle of it was Mark. But there was something else I didn't expect. The deeper I dug, the more I saw names I knew. People I trusted. People who had smiled at me in meetings, sent me motivational quotes, celebrated birthdays together. Some of them were listed as approvers or verifiers on those fake transactions. My heart sank. It wasn't just Mark. This web went higher and wider than I could have imagined. The company I had worked for wasn't just corrupt, it was built on corruption. The same empire that everyone praised for integrity and innovation was actually feeding off lies and greed. And I had been too blind, too loyal to see it. I leaned back and looked at the clock. It was past midnight, but I couldn't stop. Something inside me had switched on, a mix of curiosity and anger that kept me awake. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, yet I kept scrolling through files, connecting dots, reading things that made me question every single person I trusted. I remembered my first day there. How proud I'd been to join such a prestigious company. How I'd promised myself to grow there, to make a name for myself. I worked harder than anyone else, never complained, always stayed late. I believed effort was enough. That if I kept my head down and gave my best, success would find me. But now, staring at those documents, I realized effort meant nothing in a place where loyalty was just another transaction. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of unread messages. News had started spreading. Something was happening inside the company. Internal audits, frozen accounts, canceled meetings. Employees were confused and scared. No one knew what was going on, but everyone felt the shift. The empire was trembling, and I knew it wouldn't take much to push it further. That day, I met with someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, Daniel. He used to be a senior accountant before he quietly left the company last year. People said he left for personal reasons, but now I wondered if he had seen something too. I messaged him, and he agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I saw him, he looked tired, older, like someone who had been carrying secrets for too long. We sat by the window, and for a while, neither of us said much. Then I told him everything, how they took my role, gave Mark a bonus, and what I found afterward. He listened without interrupting, just nodding slowly. When I finished, he sighed and said, "You're not the first to find it, but you might be the first with enough proof to make it count." His words hit me hard. He told me that before he left, he discovered similar irregularities, but every time he tried to report them, someone higher up shut it down. Threats, quiet transfers, or mistakes that erased files overnight. He said he couldn't fight it alone, so he walked away before it destroyed him. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Because they don't listen to truth when it costs them money." For a long time, we just sat there, the noise of the cafe filling the silence between us. Then Daniel pulled out a small flash drive from his pocket. "This," he said, sliding it across the table, "is what I couldn't delete before I left. I think it connects to what you found." When I plugged it into my laptop later that night, my heart nearly stopped. The files he gave me weren't just invoices or fake vendors. They were internal emails, conversations between executives planning how to hide funds, manipulate reports, and silence anyone who noticed. And there, in one email chain, was a familiar name. The CEO. He wasn't just aware, he was leading it. That discovery changed everything. This wasn't about Mark anymore. This was about an entire empire built on deception, run by people who thought they were untouchable. And now, for the first time, they were vulnerable. But even as I pieced everything together, doubt crept in. What would I do with this? Expose them? Go to the authorities? Or just walk away like Daniel did? The thought of getting dragged into something bigger than I could handle scared me. They had power, money, influence. Things I didn't. But I had the truth. Still, I couldn't ignore the risk. People like them didn't go down quietly. I'd seen what they did to anyone who stood in their way. I was already out of the company. I could easily disappear, and no one would ask questions. The idea lingered in my mind longer than I wanted it to. But then I remember the way they humiliated me in that meeting room. The look on Mark's face when he got that bonus. The way they made me feel invisible after years of loyalty. And suddenly, fear turned into fuel. That night, I began organizing the data, every file, every screenshot, every timestamp. I wanted everything to make sense, every piece to fit together perfectly. I wasn't ready to strike yet, but I wanted to be prepared for when the time came. The more I worked, the more I realized how deep this went. It wasn't just fake vendors and stolen money. It was insider deals, tax fraud, bribery masked as consulting fees. They had fooled investors, partners, and even the government. For years, they'd grown their $48 million empire by stealing from the people who built it. And now, their foundation was starting to crumble. At that point, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. It wasn't just personal, it was moral. I couldn't let them destroy more lives while pretending to be heroes. I wanted people to know the truth, to see what really went on behind those polished office doors. But I also knew this story wasn't finished. Because the moment the first internal alert went out, someone must have realized what was happening. And if they connected it back to me, I'd become their next target. As I closed my laptop that night, a notification popped up on my phone, an unknown number, just one message. "Nice work. But you should stop digging." I froze. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. No name. No context. Just that one sentence. Someone new. And just like that, I realized the game had officially begun. I stared at that message for a long time, the glow of the phone screen the only light in the room. "Nice work. But you should stop digging." My hands went cold. Someone was watching me. Someone who knew exactly what I'd been doing. I locked my phone, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, listening to my heartbeat echo in the silence. For the first time since it all started, I felt fear creeping in. This wasn't just about office politics anymore. I had stepped into something bigger, something dangerous. Sleep was impossible that night. Every sound outside felt suspicious. Every car that passed made me think someone was watching. I replayed everything in my head. The files, the people, the company. I tried to figure out who could have sent that message. Was it Mark? The CEO? Someone else who had something to lose if I kept digging? The next morning, I checked my phone again. No new messages. But my gut told me it wasn't over. When I logged into my email, I saw something strange. 3 failed login attempts from an unknown device. Someone was trying to get into my account. I changed my passwords, deleted unnecessary files from the cloud, and moved everything important to an encrypted drive. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or careful. Maybe both. Later that day, I called Daniel. I told him about the message and the login attempts. His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern underneath. "They know," he said quietly. And if they know, they'll try to shut you down before you go public. What should I do? I asked. He hesitated. You have two options, disappear or fight. But if you choose to fight, you need to be smart. Don't rush. Don't trust anyone. Those words stuck with me. Don't trust anyone. It was good advice, but also a lonely kind of truth. Over the next few days, I kept my distance from everyone. I avoided calls from old coworkers and stopped posting anything online. I worked quietly, connecting more pieces, uncovering more layers. Each new file revealed just how wide the corruption spread. Partnerships with fake charities, deals made in foreign accounts, reports rewritten to hide missing millions. And at the center of it all was the CEO, calm and smiling in every company video, preaching about ethics and innovation. But what disturbed me most were the personal stories hidden inside the documents. People who had been forced out, employees who disappeared from records without explanation, departments quietly dissolved when someone asked too many questions. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power and silence. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I got an email from an old colleague, Sophia. She used to work in the finance department before she was suddenly transferred to another branch. Her message was short. I know what you found. We need to talk. I hesitated before replying. I wasn't sure if it was a trap, but something in her tone felt genuine. We agreed to meet at a small park outside the city, away from places we could be recognized. When I saw her, she looked nervous, constantly glancing around as if expecting someone to follow her. I shouldn't even be here, she whispered. But you're not the only one who noticed things. She told me she had seen parts of the financial discrepancies months ago. When she questioned them, her supervisor told her to let it go. Days later, she was transferred to another office without explanation. Since then, she had stayed quiet until she saw the recent chaos inside the company. I don't know what you did, she said, but people are scared. Meetings are being canceled. The finance head flew out last night. Something big is happening. I listened carefully, realizing that the cracks were widening faster than I thought. The empire was already shaking, and the people inside were scrambling to save themselves. Before we left, Sophia slipped me a folded piece of paper. This is a name you should look into, she said softly. He's the one who handled most of the hidden accounts. The name written on it was someone I didn't expect, Anthony Blake, the company's legal advisor. The man everyone respected, the one who always stood by the CEO in every press conference, talking about transparency and compliance. That night, I started researching him. The deeper I went, the stranger it got. Anthony wasn't just a lawyer, he was the fixer. The one who cleaned up every mess before it became public. He had connections in government offices, banks, even media outlets. He was the thread that tied everything together. And that meant if I wanted to bring down the empire, I had to get through him first. But while I was digging into Anthony's background, something unexpected happened again. I got an email from Mark. The subject line was simple: we need to talk. I froze. Of all people, why him? Part of me wanted to delete it, but curiosity got the better of me. His message wasn't long, just a few sentences saying he wanted to meet and clear things up. He claimed he had information I'd want to hear. I didn't reply right away. I didn't trust him, but I couldn't ignore the chance that he might know something useful. After all, he was still inside. If the empire was collapsing, he'd be close enough to feel the cracks. For the next 2 days, I debated what to do. I even called Daniel for advice. He told me not to meet Mark in person. If he's reaching out, it's because he's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also make traps. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, Mark wasn't as safe as he once thought. The company was spiraling. News was spreading quietly, rumors of investigations, sudden resignations, frozen accounts. Investors were getting nervous, and partners were starting to distance themselves. The empire's image of strength was fading fast. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I was still invisible, watching from a distance, collecting, waiting. But even as I felt that small sense of control, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me too. I'd noticed cars parked near my apartment that didn't belong to anyone I knew. One night, I came home to find my door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, but my laptop had been moved. That was when I realized the fight wasn't one-sided anymore. The people at the top were starting to panic. And when powerful people panic, they get dangerous. I called Daniel again, told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "They're not going to stop. You have something they can't afford to lose. So now you need to decide. How far are you willing to go?" I didn't answer him right away. I looked out the window at the dark street below, lights flickering in the distance, and I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. I was determined. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about showing the world what happens when greed goes unchecked. But I also knew that telling the truth would come with a cost. As I turned back to my computer that night, ready to take the next step, another message appeared on my screen, an anonymous email with no subject, no sender name. Only one line inside, "You're getting too close." My chest tightened as I stared at the words. And for the first time, I realized that maybe this wasn't just a battle against a company. It was a battle for my life. The message on my screen froze me in place. "You're getting too close." The words looked harmless, but I could feel the threat hiding behind them. My mind raced. How do they find me again? I had been careful, using new accounts, private networks, keeping my files offline. Someone on the inside must have leaked something. Or maybe they had been watching me from the start. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow looked suspicious. The world outside my window felt too quiet, like the calm before a storm. I sat there, staring at the flashing cursor on my screen, realizing I had crossed a line I couldn't step back from. I wasn't just exposing corruption anymore. I was fighting a machine built to bury the truth. The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A male voice, calm but firm, spoke from the other end. "You're in over your head. Stop what you're doing before you can't." Then the line went dead. No name. No number. Just that voice, echoing in my head like a warning I didn't want to hear. I knew I had to act before they did. I met Daniel again that evening at a quiet diner far from the city. He looked even more worried this time. I told him everything. The messages, the phone call, the strange cars near my apartment. He listened silently, then leaned in and said, "They're scared. That's why they're watching you. Whatever you found must be powerful enough to bring them down." I pulled out my laptop and showed him the files I'd been compiling, the documents from the shared drive, the emails Daniel had given me, and the new evidence Sophia helped me uncover. Together, they painted a full picture of how the company's $48 million empire had been built on fraud and cover-ups. Hidden accounts, fake charities, insider deals, bribes disguised as donations. It was all there, and most of it had the CEO's digital signature. Daniel's face hardened as he scrolled through the data. "This could destroy them," he said quietly. "But it could destroy you too if you're not careful." I looked out the window, the city lights blurring behind the rain. Then maybe it's time someone stopped being careful. That night, after Daniel left, I decided to take the next step. I sent a few encrypted copies of the files to multiple drives and hid them in different places. One went to a private journalist I knew years ago, someone who had once covered corporate scandals. I didn't use my real name, but I attached a note. "If anything happens to me, this is your story." Hours later, my power suddenly went out. The entire apartment went dark. I froze. Outside, the streetlights were still on, which meant it wasn't a local outage. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone. The battery was low, but I used the flashlight to move toward the window. A car sat across the street with its headlights off, engine running. Someone was inside, watching. I didn't stay. I grabbed my laptop and the backup drives, slipped out the back door, and walked fast down the alley behind the building. The cold air hit me hard, but it kept me alert. I didn't know where to go, only that I couldn't stay there any longer. I ended up at a small motel by the edge of town. The place was quiet, run down, but safe enough for one night. Sitting on that old mattress, I thought about everything that led to this. The promotion that wasn't mine. The bonus they gave to Mark. The empire they protected with lies. It felt like a lifetime ago, like I'd been someone else back then. Someone who still believed hard work mattered. Now, all that was left was truth and survival. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Sophia. She said people were panicking at the office. The CEO had called an emergency meeting overnight, and several executives were suddenly on leave. Rumors were spreading fast. Investors were pulling out. The company's reputation was crumbling in real time. But that wasn't all. Sophia mentioned that the CEO had hired a private security firm to track internal leaks. My stomach twisted when I read that. They weren't looking for leaks. They were looking for me. I replied quickly, telling her to stay quiet and not contact me again until I reached out. She didn't argue, just sent one last message. Be careful. They play dirty. Later that day, Daniel called again. You need to go public now, he said urgently. Once the story hits the media, they can't silence you. I already sent some of it, I said, pacing the motel room. But it's not enough. I need the final link. The one that connects everything directly to the CEO. Daniel paused. You mean the offshore accounts? Yes. They exist, but I don't have the access. Not yet. He was quiet for a moment. There's one person who might know how to get it, Mark. The name hit me like a cold wave. Mark. The man who took my job, my project, and my trust. I didn't want to see him again, but part of me knew Daniel was right. Mark had been inside those meetings. He'd been close to the CEO. If anyone had the missing piece, it was him. That night, I finally replied to Mark's message. Meet me tomorrow. Noon. The old warehouse on Birch Street. It was risky, but it was the only way forward. The next day, I got there early. The warehouse was half abandoned, quiet except for the echo of dripping water. Sunlight cut through the broken windows in long streaks. I waited, every sound making me tense. Then footsteps. Mark appeared at the entrance, wearing a dark coat, his face pale and uneasy. He didn't look like the confident man from that meeting anymore. His eyes were tired, almost frightened. You shouldn't have contacted me, he said. You contacted me first, I replied. You said you wanted to talk. He glanced around nervously. They're watching me too, he whispered. You think they'll let anyone walk away after what's happening? I was just the face, not the one pulling the strings. I crossed my arms. Then tell me who is. Mark took a deep breath. It's bigger than just the CEO. There's a network. Partners overseas, fake corporations moving money in and out through his private firm. I have some of the files, but if I hand them over, they'll come for me next. Then we do it together, I said. We expose them before they destroy us both. He looked at me for a long time, his expression heavy. You don't understand, he muttered. Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. I already pulled it the moment they took what I built, I said quietly. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Mark handed me a small flash drive. This is everything I could copy before they locked the system. Offshore accounts, fake audits, secret transfers. You'll find what you need there. I took it, my hand trembling slightly. Why help me now? He gave a faint, bitter smile. Because I finally realized loyalty means nothing to people who treat you like you're disposable. Maybe this way, I get to do one thing right. Before I could say anything else, a sound echoed outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. We both froze. Mark's eyes widened. They found us, he whispered. I looked toward the broken windows and saw a dark SUV pull up near the entrance. Two figures stepped out, both wearing suits, moving quickly and quietly. Mark turned to me, panic rising in his voice. You need to go. Now. What about you? He shook his head. They'll expect you to run. That'll buy you time. I hesitated, torn between leaving and staying, but his expression told me everything. There was no time to argue. I slipped out through the side exit, clutching the flash drive like my life depended on it, because it did. Outside, the sky had turned gray, the air heavy with rain. I ran down the narrow alley, my breath sharp and fast. Behind me, I heard shouting, then a loud crash. I didn't look back. I couldn't. All I knew was that the empire that had stolen everything from me was now desperate enough to silence anyone who threatened it. As I reached the main road, I jumped into a passing bus, hiding in the back seat. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. I opened my bag and looked at the flash drive. This was it, the final key, the proof that could destroy their empire. But before I could even catch my breath, my phone buzzed again. Another message, no name, no number. Too late. He's gone. My chest tightened. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew what that meant. Mark had paid the price for helping me. And now, I was the last one left standing between them and the truth. Rain poured down as the bus sped through the city, blurring the lights into streaks of gold and red. I sat in the back seat, clutching the flash drive, so tightly my fingers hurt. Mark's last words echoed in my mind, "They'll expect you to run." I had no idea if he was still alive or not, but the message on my phone said enough. My chest felt heavy. The man who had once taken everything from me had just risked his life to make things right. I didn't know whether to feel anger, guilt, or gratitude. Maybe all three. I got off the bus 2 stops later, blending into the crowd near the train station. I kept my head down, moving quickly, trying to disappear. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into something I couldn't escape. The flash drive in my pocket felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just evidence now. It was a weapon. And whoever sent that last message knew I had it. I found a corner table inside a small cafe and opened my laptop, my hand still shaking. I plugged in the flash drive and waited for the files to load. There were dozens of folders, all labeled with random codes and numbers. I clicked one open and froze. It wasn't just financial data this time. It was communication logs, emails, private messages, recordings. They weren't just hiding money. They were silencing people, journalists, whistleblowers, employees who tried to speak up. Each file told a story of someone who had tried to expose the truth and how they were quietly erased from the system. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. My own name. A file labeled Employee Review Phase 2. I opened it and stared at the words. It wasn't about performance or evaluation. It was a report about me, tracking my activities, listing people I had contacted, even mentioning my conversation with Daniel and Sophia. The date on the file was from before I was even fired. They had been watching me for months. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. All this time, I thought I was the one uncovering their secrets. But maybe they had been letting me. Maybe everything I found was meant for me to find. A distraction. A trap. My pulse raced as I scrolled through the document. At the bottom was a single line that chilled me to the core. Phase 2 confirmed. Monitor contact to ensure full trace. I closed the laptop and looked around. No one in the cafe seemed to notice me, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I grabbed my things and left, stepping back into the rain. I needed to reach Daniel. If this was a setup, he had to know. I called him as I hurried down the street, the rain soaking through my jacket. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. My chest tightened. I kept walking, faster this time, until I finally reached his apartment building. The lights inside were off, and his door was slightly open. I hesitated, then pushed it gently. The apartment was dark except for the flickering glow of a TV left on mute. Papers were scattered across the floor, and his laptop was still on the table. But Daniel wasn't there. I stepped inside, calling his name, but there was only silence. Then I noticed something on the wall near his desk, a small security camera, blinking red. I moved closer, realizing it wasn't his. Someone had installed it recently. My hands trembled as I pulled the plug and checked his computer. The last open folder was full of screenshots, images of me. At the cafe, at my apartment, even outside the warehouse with Mark. My throat went dry. Someone had been tracking both of us. They knew every step we'd taken. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Heavy. My body froze. I turned, but the hallway was empty. I grabbed the laptop, shoved it into my bag and ran. Out the door, down the stairs, into the street. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop until I reached a crowded area. My mind was spinning. Daniel was gone. Mark was gone. And now, somehow, I was the only one left holding the truth and the bait. Back in the motel that night, I went through the files again, trying to make sense of the trap. That's when I found the twist I never expected. Hidden in the flash drive was an encrypted folder labeled Project Haven. It was password protected, but I noticed something odd. The encryption key was the same format used by the company's internal archive system. That meant only someone from the top could have created it. I ran a few decoding attempts, and after what felt like hours, the folder opened. Inside was a series of confidential memos. They weren't about business. They were about people, dozens of employees whose personal data had been secretly collected and sold to third-party partners. private medical records, family details, financial information, all traded for profit. It wasn't just corruption now. It was exploitation on a massive scale. But then came the real shock. One of the memos was signed by a name I never expected, Sophia. I reread it 3 times, hoping I was mistaken. But her name was right there, along with her digital signature. She wasn't just a bystander. She had been part of it. My mind raced back to the day we met at the park, the way she kept glancing around, the way she warned me to stay quiet. It wasn't fear. It was guilt. She wasn't helping me out of conscience. She was cleaning up her side before it all exploded. The betrayal hit harder than I imagined. I had trusted her, shared everything with her. And now I realized she was probably feeding information back to them all along. That's how they knew where I'd been. That's how they tracked Daniel. I felt sick. Everything I thought I knew was falling apart. The web wasn't just around the company, it was around me. I wasn't hunting them anymore. They were hunting me. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message popped up. Stop running. We can still fix this. For a brief second, I considered replying, asking what they wanted. But then another message followed. You're not the target. You're the example. The meaning hit me instantly. They didn't want to silence me quietly. They wanted to use me to scare others. To send a message that anyone who tried to expose them would meet the same fate. That's when something inside me snapped. Maybe they could erase me from their records, but they couldn't erase the truth. Not if I made it public first. I didn't care what it cost anymore. I connected the flash drive, opened every file, and started uploading everything to a cloud server under an encrypted channel. I attached copies to several anonymous emails set to release automatically within 24 hours. If anything happened to me, the truth would go live for the whole world to see. But just as the upload reached 70%, a notification appeared on my screen. Remote access detected. Connection compromised. My heart stopped. They were inside. They had found me again. I yanked the plug out, but the damage was done. Half the files were corrupted, and I didn't know how much they'd seen. Then came a knock at the door. 3 slow knocks. I froze, staring at the handle as the sound echoed through the motel room. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever was on the other side wasn't there by accident. The rain outside grew louder, drumming against the window like a warning. I took a step back, clutching the flash drive. Another knock, this time harder. My pulse raced as I looked toward the bathroom window, the only possible escape. I didn't know who was behind that door, the company, the security firm, or maybe even Sophia herself, but I knew one thing for sure, the truth was no longer safe. And neither was I. The sound of those knocks still echoed in my ears as I backed toward the bathroom window. My heart was pounding, so hard it felt like the walls could hear it. The door handle rattled once, then stopped. I froze, holding my breath, waiting. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, in a calm voice that sent chills down my spine, someone said my name. It was Sophia. I didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. My mind replayed that file I'd seen, the one with her name and signature. Every instinct told me not to trust her. But if she was here, it meant something had changed. I slowly opened the bathroom door halfway, keeping my eyes fixed on her shadow through the glass. "Please open the door," she said, her voice trembling. "You're in danger. They know everything." I hesitated, then unlocked it halfway. She stepped in, soaked from the rain, her face pale and eyes swollen like she hadn't slept in days. She looked nothing like the confident woman I'd met weeks ago. She was holding a folder tight against her chest. "I didn't have a choice," she said before I could speak. "They made me sign it. They threatened my brother. I swear, I never wanted to betray you." Her words cut through me. Part of me wanted to believe her, but the other part had stopped trusting anyone. "Then why are you here?" I asked quietly. "Because it's over," she said, opening the folder. "They're erasing everything. Every file, every record, every person who knows. Including you. I stole this before they could destroy it. It's the master ledger. Every illegal transfer, every name involved. You were right all along." She handed me the papers, her hand shaking. Inside were pages of transactions, each one connected to offshore accounts and shell companies. At the bottom of the list, in bold, was the name of the man who started it all, the CEO, Richard Hanley. The same man who had replaced me, who had given my role to someone else and rewarded him with a $9,400 bonus like it meant nothing. Everything led back to him. Every dollar stolen, every lie told, every life ruined. It all came from his desk. Before I could speak, Sophia looked toward the door again. "We don't have much time." "They're coming." I grabbed my laptop and the flash drive. "We can go public. Right now. We'll send it all out. News outlets, watchdogs, everyone." She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "Once we do this, there's no going back." "I already crossed that line," I said. We moved fast. I reconnected to the secure server, this time using a private connection Mark had once shown me. The files began uploading again, this time. Everything from the flash drive and Sophia's folder combined. My hands trembled as the progress bar climbed past 60%, 80%, 95%. Then, just before it reached 100%, the motel lights flickered. Someone had cut the power. I turned to Sophia, but before either of us could move, the window shattered. Two men in dark jackets stormed in. One grabbed the laptop, the other lunged toward me. I struggled, pushing back with everything I had, until Sophia swung a lamp, hitting one of them hard enough to knock him down. The other grabbed her wrist, twisting it, but I managed to yank the laptop away and run toward the door. "Go!" she shouted. I stumbled out into the rain, clutching the laptop, and sprinted down the alley. Behind me, I heard shouting, then a single gunshot. I froze for half a second, my stomach twisting, but I couldn't go back. I kept running until my legs gave out. I ducked behind a dumpster and opened the laptop again. The screen was cracked, but the connection was still active. The upload had finished. The files were live. I sent one last message to every major media outlet I could think of with a link and a short note. "This is what they didn't want you to see." Within minutes, I started seeing notifications, downloads, forwards, messages flooding in. Someone had already mirrored the files. It was spreading fast, too fast for anyone to stop. Then, for the first time in weeks, I saw something that made me smile through the exhaustion. A news alert. Breaking. Evidence emerges of massive corporate corruption tied to Hanley Enterprises. The empire was cracking. By morning, it wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. Stock prices plummeted. News anchors called it the biggest corporate scandal of the decade. Executives were resigning, offices were raided, and Richard Hanley's name was everywhere. The $48 million empire he'd built on lies was falling apart, piece by piece. But even as I watched, I couldn't stop thinking about Sophia. I didn't know if she made it out. No messages, no calls, just silence. Days later, I received a package at my apartment. No name, no return address. Inside was a small USB and a note in her handwriting. "They never knew I copied the archive. Finish what we started." My chest tightened as I plugged in the USB. Inside was one final file, a recorded video. It was Sophia, looking straight into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. But I need you to know, there's one more layer. Hanley wasn't working alone. Someone higher approved everything. Someone inside the government. The ledger isn't the end, it's the beginning." The video cut out, leaving me staring at the dark screen. The twist hit me like a wave. All this time, I thought I brought down the empire. But it wasn't the top, it was just the front. The real power was still out there, untouched, watching. I sat there for a long time, the rain tapping softly on the window. For once, I felt both victory and fear. The truth was out, the world knew what they did, and justice had begun. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because when I turned on my phone, a new message waited for me. No sender, just one line. "You think you ended it? We just changed the rules." And with that, the screen went black. The empire had fallen, but something much bigger had just begun. The message on my phone stayed there for a long time, glowing against the darkness of my room. "You think you ended it? We just changed the rules." I didn't know who sent it or what it meant, but deep down, I understood one thing. The fight wasn't really about money anymore. It was about power, and power never disappears. It just moves around, waiting for the next person willing to use it. Still, for the first time in months, I wasn't scared. I'd already faced everything they could throw at me. Losing my job, my friends, my peace. It had all stripped away the version of myself that used to stay silent. In the following weeks, the story spread everywhere. Every news outlet covered it. Reporters kept calling, asking for interviews, and though I refused most, I agreed to one major platform. I told them everything. From the day I lost my role to the night I ran through the rain with the evidence. The anchor listened quietly, eyes wide, then asked me what kept me going. I thought for a moment and said, "Because silence only protects those who abuse it." That line went viral. It wasn't planned, but it became a message people connected to. It reminded them that one small act of courage can shake something much bigger. The company's downfall unfolded like a chain reaction. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up, and the media revealed how Hanley Enterprises had built its $48 million empire through fraud, manipulation, and fear. Within 2 months, the company declared bankruptcy. Hanley himself was arrested after trying to flee overseas. When I saw his face on the news, I didn't feel satisfaction or revenge, just a quiet sadness. The man who once thought he was untouchable now looked like a shadow of himself, cornered by the truth he tried so hard to bury. But victory didn't feel like I imagined it would. I still had questions. About Sophia. About Mark. About how deep it all really went. One morning, I received an email from an unknown address. It had no subject, no body, just one attachment, a photo of Sophia sitting by the sea. She was alive. I didn't know where she was, but the picture looked peaceful. I smiled through the tears that welled in my eyes. Maybe she had finally found her way out of the darkness, too. As for Mark, there was never any official word. The authorities couldn't confirm his death or survival. But one day, when I was sorting through old messages, I found an encrypted file on my phone that I didn't remember saving. It had his name on it. When I opened it, there was a short note. "You did what I couldn't. Keep going." It wasn't much, but it was enough to know that somewhere, somehow, he'd seen what happened. Slowly, life began to rebuild itself. I started consulting for smaller companies that wanted to improve transparency. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was nothing compared to what I used to earn, but it felt real. I met people who genuinely cared about doing things right, about creating businesses that didn't hide behind lies or power. For the first time in years, I woke up feeling like I was part of something meaningful. Still, that last message, "We just changed the rules," stayed in the back of my mind. Sometimes, I'd notice strange things. Anonymous emails that led nowhere. Random calls that went silent when I answered. Files in my system I didn't remember downloading. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe the people behind the curtain were still out there, watching from a distance. But instead of fear, it only fueled me to stay alert, to keep pushing for accountability wherever I could. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a university about ethics in business. Standing in front of a hall full of students, I realized how far I'd come from the person who once sat quietly in an office corner, too afraid to question anything. I told them my story, not the dramatic version from the headlines, but the real one. The sleepless nights, the doubt, the feeling of being completely alone. I told them that courage doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fear and choosing to move anyway. When I finished, there was silence for a moment, then a wave of applause. I saw in their eyes the same spark I once had, the belief that truth, no matter how small, still matters. After the talk, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous but determined. She said she worked at a tech startup where she noticed irregular data handling practices, and she didn't know what to do. I saw the same uncertainty I once felt. I gave her the same advice I wish someone had given me. Document everything. Protect yourself first, but never stop believing that what you do matters. She smiled, thanked me, and walked away. Watching her go, I realized the story wasn't really about the fall of a company, it was about the rise of awareness. As time passed, I learned to let go of the bitterness. The anger that once fueled me began to fade, replaced by something stronger, clarity. The truth didn't just bring down a corporation, it rebuilt parts of me that I didn't even know were broken. I started reconnecting with old friends, rebuilding relationships that had fallen apart during the chaos. I even went back to the park where I first met Sophia, sat on the same bench, and watched the sunset. The city felt quieter now, almost like it was healing too. One evening, as I walked home, my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from a private number. Just 3 words. Keep watching higher. I stopped, staring at it. It could have meant anything. A threat, a warning, or maybe even a clue. But instead of fear, a calm smile spread across my face. Whoever they were, they had already lost their greatest weapon, my silence. The next morning, I deleted the message and stepped out into the sunlight. The air smelled like rain had just ended, clean and sharp. I realized I didn't need to chase the shadows anymore. The truth had already done its work. Maybe the people at the top would keep shifting, maybe new ones would rise to replace the old, but at least now, people were watching. The story that began with a stolen roll and a $9,400 bonus had turned into something none of us expected, a chain reaction that showed how fragile even the biggest empires can be when they're built on lies. It wasn't just about me, or them, or the files. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced, ignored, or replaced. Sometimes, the biggest victories don't come from winning battles. They come from refusing to stay quiet in the face of injustice. And sometimes, the fall of an empire begins with one person simply saying, "No more." As I walked away from everything that once defined me, I felt a quiet peace. I didn't know what came next, and maybe that was okay. The storm had passed, and though the world would keep spinning with new secrets and new players, I had done my part. The truth had been spoken, the lies had crumbled, and the story had finally found its ending. Or maybe its beginning.